Hello! Today we are going to talk about combining all of the operations. So none of what we're going to do today is technically new. However, we are just putting things together. So when we are going ahead and doing this, something very, very, very important to remember is BEDMAS. And the other second thing to remember is that when we do subtraction, we really are just distributing the negative. We think of subtraction as distributing a -1 throughout all of our terms. So when we do our multiplication step or distribution step of any sort, we're also going to make sure we're doing the distribution of the negative if there's a subtraction piece involved as well. So as we go along here, one of the easiest methods or the most convenient methods when we are going to go through a multi-step question, such like the ones we have below, is actually going to be to use rainbow method. Now, you can do grid method and do things in chunks, and once you figure out what the result of each of those chunks are, then you can combine the chunks using whatever operation those chunks are combined with. So in theory, I could do this as a grid method, I could do this as a grid method, and then subtract my second answer from my first one and having to distribute the negative. The rainbow method tends to be a little bit easier or more efficient in that way. Now we're going to start off with a few examples in this first one. With something that we'll want to keep in mind is that we have two multiplication statements going on. We have this multiplication of two binomials together, and we have this multiplication of this -y. We're going to treat it as a -y rather than a -y because the distribution happens together. The -y by this 2x plus y. We have two distributions going on, and then we're going to collect our like terms at the end. So let's get cracking. If you want to give any of these questions a go at any point, please pause the video, try them on your own. But I'm going to take a look and start it off. So all the distributions that we've got going on, so I have this 5x being distributed to everything in the second bracket, and I have this y also being distributed to everything in the second bracket. Now, if we're talking distribution, I also have this -y being distributed to everything in this bracket, and that includes the 2x and the y. Now, once I've done all three of those distributions, I am done distributing everything, which means if I'm done distributing everything, all of those brackets can go away. So let's do those distributions. I'm going to start with the blue stuff. So 5x times 3x, 5 times 3 is 15, x times x gives me x squared. The second blue one gives me 5x times -y, so that's going to give me a -5. And x times nothing, so it tags long, and y times nothing, so it tags long. Of course, when I write this, I make sure I write it alphabetically, so x comes before y, because it helps me identify any like terms. The next thing I'm going to do here, I'm going to do those green distributions. So I have y times 3x, and both of those are positive. So I have numbers first, x is second, and y is last. And then I'm going to do my y times my -y, which gives me a -y squared. So all of those first distributions have been done. Let's tackle the pink stuff. I'm going to distribute that negative at the exact same time I'm distributing that y. So that -y gets applied to that 2x, numbers first, so -2x, then y. And then that -y is going to be applied to the positive y. That gives me a -y squared. Now let's take a look for any like terms. So this x squared doesn't seem to have kind of anything going on there. This -5xy, I'm looking for other terms that have xy. And that's the positive 3xy and the -2xy. Those are all like terms. And then I'm looking for this y squared. I have a -y squared and another -y squared. Now, just as a reminder, final answer, when we talk about standard form, I don't care how we write this particular question as my final answer because there's more than one variable in a single term. So as long as each term is written alphabetically, I don't care how the terms are written in respective order to each other. So I'm just going to go from left to right. So my yellow will go first. So my 15x squared. Now all those purple-like terms, the -5, the +3, and the -2 will end up giving me a -4. And of course, my xy. And a -y squared and another -y squared. Again, remembering those invisible ones there. So -1 gives me -2. And of course, the y squared. So this here is my final answer. All right. If you need to pause this video to take a look at what we did, copy anything down, make sure you're on the right track, feel free to do so. Otherwise, I am scooting over to B. All right. BEDMAS, B BEDMAS. When I take a look at this, before I even do all those distributions of multiplication, I notice I have an exponent. Of course, we all know this exponent cannot be distributed because there's addition in that bracket. So I'm going to rewrite that exponent as repeated multiplication. And I'm going to change nothing else. So everything else I'm going to write down exactly as is, except that 4x plus 1, I'm going to write as 4x plus 1 times 4x plus 1 instead of squaring it. Now, I'm going to do all those distributions. I'm going to do this distribution, so blues. I'm going to do greens. I'm going to do pinks. And I'm going to do light purples. Now, I might also have to deal with this after, but because it's a positive, I don't have any additional things I have to distribute that positive sign to. So I only have 4 distributions here, and my distributions will be done. So, taking a look, I'm going to go blue, green, pink, then purple. If you want to pause the video, try it on your own, that'd be great. And welcome back. So, the blues here, 5x and 2x give me 10x squared. 5x and -2 give me -10x. 3 and 2x give me 6x. 3 and -2 give me -6. All right, taking a look at the next bit. So pinks, so 4x and 4x gives me 16x squared. 4x and 1 gives me 4x. 1 and 4x gives me 4x. 1 and 1 gives me 1. Okay, quick little pause break. Remember I had told you, because there's a plus sign in between those, having brackets there would not have mattered. If this were not a positive, if this were a negative, we know that negatives also have to be distributed. So it would be very, very crucial in that instant to make sure I have my second set of distributions in brackets, because the negative would apply to everything that follows it. But we don't have the negative, so we don't have to worry about it now. But I'm willing to bet that in future questions we will. So I just wanted to bring it up. Okay, like terms. I am going to color code some stuff and look for like terms. I've got x squared here. I've got an x squared here. I've got x, 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 x. And I've got number. So I'm going to collect my like terms here. So 10x and 16x gives me 26. 10x squared and 16x squared. That's what I missed. Gives me 26x squared. -10, +6, +4, and +4 give me +4x. And -6 and +1 give me -5. Here is my final answer. All right, we have 2 questions left. Again, try them on your own if you're feeling ready, or follow along with me, but I'm going to go through them as if you have given it a try. Okay, this question here, BEDMAS. But the other thing I noticed, I have the subtraction sign, and I know that I'm going to have to distribute the subtraction, and it was almost as if I could tell the future, but that subtraction applies to the whole entire product. So, BEDMAS tells me I have to deal with the exponents first. I cannot distribute that exponent to my bracket because there's subtraction in there, so I will have to write it out as repeated multiplication. Everything else I'm going to keep the same. So that's going to be my first step in BEDMAS. My second step in my BEDMAS is to do all of my distributions. Now, some of those distributions we already talked about, so I know that the 3x is going to be distributed to everything in the second bracket. Same with that -4. Same idea with this 4x, and same idea with this -3. But the key thing here is that subtraction sign also has to get distributed. Now, it's hard to do all those distributions at once, so after I take a look at the second set of distributions that occur after my subtraction sign, I'm going to leave that answer in a big set of brackets so I can remember to distribute the subtraction to everything in them afterwards. And yes, I have to show that as 2 separate steps. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So blues first, 3x and 3x gives me 9x squared. 3x and -4 gives me -12x. -4 and 3x gives me -12x again. And -4 and -4 give me a +16. Now I'm subtracting the answer to the next multiplication statement here. So I'm going to keep that answer of my multiplication statement, that product, in brackets. And I get 4x times x giving me 4x squared. 4x times -7 giving me -28x. -3 times x, -3x, and -3 and -7 giving me a +21. Okay, again, remembering that subtraction sign distributes to everything that came after it. Oops, go away. Which includes everything here. Now, distributing a negative doesn't change the value, but changes the sign. So I'm not going to do anything here to my left quite yet, but I am going to distribute the negative. So a +4x squared becomes a -4x squared, a -28x becomes a +28x, a -3x becomes a +3x, and a +21 becomes a -21. And like I said before, my kryptonite is I always forget one of those, so I always double check I flipped all those signs. And I did, so I feel pretty proud of myself. Now that absolutely all of the distributions are done, now I can think about collecting like terms. So I'm looking for anything that has x squareds in it. Now I'm looking for anything with x's in it. Now I'm looking at anything that just had numbers in it. And I will start to collect. Standard form says I should do the x squareds first. So 9x squared, -4x squared gives me 5x squared. Next, I should do all those x's. -12 and -12 give me -24. -24 and +28 give me +4. And +4 and +3 give me +7. Now, of course, those were just the coefficients for my x, so I get a +7x. And then last but not least, I have +16 and -21. My final answer there will give me a -5. Okay, little bit of a doozy, but we made it through and we have one left. And the last one, very similar to the one we just did, except the squares at the end instead of at the beginning, but we can still handle it just the same. So pause this video, compare D and C together, try it, and then come back to me. Okay, welcome back. Step 1, that exponent. I can't distribute it to that bracket because that bracket has addition in there. So I have to write it as repeated multiplication. And that's what I do first. The next, my distributions. The x goes to everything in that second bracket. Same with that 2. Same with this 3x. Same with this other 2. Key thing here is I have subtraction. That subtraction applies to everything that comes after it. So when I go ahead and do those distributions, those second distributions, that product will remain in those brackets. We are going to tackle this. Blue first. X times x gives me x squared. X times -5, -5x. 2 times x, 2x, 2 times -5, -10. Now I have my subtraction, and my answer goes in these brackets. And I'm going to do the pinks and the purples. 3x and 3x gives me 9x squared. 3x and 2 gives me 6x. 2 and 3x also gives me 6x. 2 and 2 give me 4. Now, this is where the key subtraction has to be distributed. Pew, 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 pew. Again, when I do that distribution of the subtraction, my first chunk stays exactly the same. I'm not doing anything to it. But my second chunk all changes signs. 9x squared becomes -9x squared. 6x becomes -6x. 6x becomes -6x. 4 becomes -4. And now we do our like terms. I'm looking for all of my x squareds. I'm looking for all of my x's. And I'm looking for all of my plane numbers. Standard form suggests I deal with those x squareds first. So x squared really has that 1 in front of it. 1x squared and -9x squared give me -8x squared. -5, +2 give me -3. -3 and -6 give me -9. -9 and -6 give me -15. And then just for my numbers, -10 and -4 give me -14. And that is it. We have completed those 4 questions for our combining operations part 2. There is practice that follows, but there is also a quiz that follows. So keep your ears and eyes open to hear when that quiz is coming. Make sure you do the practice. Make sure you ask questions if you have them. But that is it for now. Goodbye.